neglected. The plantation was broken up and sold, and the part with the home and the cemetery were the first part sold.
How large was the house?
I've heard different versions of it. I've heard it was just a mansion, a huge place when they finally developed all the land and really made the money. One of the history books says that the Madding plantation was the largest plantation land-wise in I think they called it in the northern Alabama area. I don't know how much that covered, but I know that when he finally got through expanding his land, it went from a mile east of Abbey Church to County Line Road through Leighton. That's an area of 4 miles, 4.5 miles. And it, all of it was land it joined.
What was the trade or the type of crops that were grown there to make money and to run the plantation?
I would say corn and cotton and livestock. Somewhere in my old digging around in records, I found a copy of his will in the archives in Moulton, and he listed, I think, about 125 slaves, and it was real interesting. They just had one name, and he had 6 or 8. Well, his will said which of the children got which slaves, and he had 6 or 8 that he said he wanted sold immediately, that there was they were the kind of that couldn't be controlled. I don't know exactly what he meant by that, but I would think that they couldn't be disciplined. But he listed them by name and wanted them sold immediately.
Was there a body of water? Was water used to transport the farm items, the cotton?
Not from this plantation. They had to go to the river to transport by water, which was 8 miles away.
And was that the Tennessee River?
Yeah. They used the water flowing in Town Creek to run mills, a grist mill and lumber mill, and that was the water power, the only running water close to it. That was maybe 3 miles away. Mm-hmm. When the wagon trains came in, they camped at I think at Brown's Ferry. That was a place that they could get across the river. And they had a prayer meeting, and the preacher prayed that they would make corn so big that Mr. Rand's grist mill would have a hard time grinding it. They really prayed for an abundant crop, but he wanted the corn kernels so big that the mill would have a hard time grinding them. And they made, of course they had to clear the land, but they made wonderful crops, and all of them prospered until the Civil War.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your memories of being with your grandmother?
She's just close to an angel. was a great lady. She had 8 children. 2 had died by the time I came along. One was drowned in the river, and the other one had cancer, I think. But she had 6 children, and they all had families, so it was a big family. We would get together. I guess Thanksgiving was when we all came together, and there'd be a big crowd. Grandmother was known for putting her good meals out, which was a tradition in the Madding family. And she could make a meal out of almost anything. And the story was that nobody ever left her door hungry. I can remember during the Depression, the hobos would ride the train. And while they switched cars at Leighton, they would come out and beg for food door to door. And I heard one of them holler at the others, "Don't miss that house on the corner. She's always got food for us." And she would cook a pan of biscuits and have biscuits and jelly if she didn't have anything readily to give them. She never let them go away hungry, black or white.
She had a good heart.
She didn't want anybody to go away hungry. I think part of it was because the soldiers coming back from the Civil War had suffered so much. They stopped at houses begging for a bite to eat, and folks didn't have anything to give them. Did the sheriff what they could, but it made an impression on grandmother. She wasn't living then, but she knew the stories because she was born shortly after the soldiers came back. I think she was the second child. Aunt Sue was the first one, and grandmother was second. So the war was an experience that was on their minds every day. But we cleaned the cemetery up. It had grown up in trees and bushes and vines and briars, and trees had fallen on the fence, and loggers had drug them out, and the fence it had an iron fence around it, and the fence was in terrible shape on the west side. We found the pieces in the woods, drug them back up, and I hired Dalton Jones to straighten it. He built a little press and straightened it a 4-inch piece at a time. He worked on it in his spare time about 6 weeks. Part of that time we took him out to the cemetery and we straightened stuff there. I carried 3 of the 10-foot panels to his house for him to work on.
How will people know how to get back to the cemetery in the coming years?
It's right behind Abbey Church. The roads change from year to year through the fields, but it's behind Abbey Church, a mile back.
Is there a person that the family has to stay in touch with to be able to take that road from the church back to the cemetery?
Well, the family has changed. The ownership has changed, I know 4 times and maybe more, but it could change again next week.
Is the cemetery recorded in the maps?
The cemetery was dropped from the maps on the last map as an abandoned cemetery. That's one of the reasons that was so anxious to clean it up, so I'm going to see that it gets back on the maps. And the little brass sign, a plaque the designated the Madding cemetery had been taken off, and the current owners found it in the field. Apparently somebody thought it might be gold and was taking it home, and then decided that it was not gold, and they threw it down in the field. And these people plowed it up, and Mr. Lee was working the ground currently, and he contacted Jimmy King and asked him what he thought about it, what he had found, and Jimmy took it and they cleaned it up, and he brought it to me. At that point, I don't know whether they knew the cemetery was there or not. It was grown up so bad, and timber had been cut, and treetops were in it. But we've cleaned it up, and we have not restored the tombstones yet. The ones that are broken, we're trying to find a way to repair them. But we've cleaned up some of them where you can read the names better. Alan Alsabrook and his son Roy Payne, and my brother Billy and my wife Lily have worked real hard out there, and some of my kids, including Frances and her husband Keith, and Susan and Bob, have worked a little with it. And we're going to try to see that it don't get in bad shape during my lifetime, and I hope the rest of the family will take it over and see that it don't become completely abandoned.
Yes, that will be important, and the great-grandchildren that were there yesterday, Grayson, will be part of carrying that forward. I
hope that the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren will take an interest. None of the other branches of the Madding family have much interest in it. But I don't want to see it abandoned and plowed over like so many more of them in this part of the county have been bulldozed and plowed over. In the past 5 years, there was a black cemetery called Black Madding Cemetery, and the bulldozers went over it, and there's no sign that there was ever a cemetery there. But that was on some of the old Madding property that was later known as the Crockett property. And just continued to swap hands, and I know that one had numerous tombstones in it while I was growing up, but there's no sign of it now.
Yeah, well, thank you for talking about the restoration of the Madding Cemetery and the history of that part of our family.
Well, hope that the family history don't completely die out. Lots of it has been passed down word of mouth, and several books, including Miss Nina Lethridge's book, 200 Years in Muscle Shoals, have references to that and numerous places of the Madding family and their contribution to the development of North Alabama.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right, we'll heat our coffee up and go ahead with the day.